The Great Smoky Mountains National Park, North Carolina, USA. I've been a backcountry ranger for 12 years. I've seen bears, I've seen mountain lions, and I've seen people lose their minds to the isolation. But in 2024, near the Deep Creek Trail, I saw something that fundamentally broke my understanding of biology. It was late October. A thick, smoking fog had settled into the valley. I was tracking a missing hiker, a young man who had vanished from his campsite, leaving behind his boots and his phone. That was the first red flag. You don't walk into the Smokies barefoot unless you're forced to. I found the first offering near a creek bed. It looked like a deer, but it had been folded. Not eaten. Folded. The anatomy was rearranged into a perfect, geometric square of fur and bone. There was no vital fluid on the ground. It was like the animal had been vacuumed dry. As I knelt to examine it, I heard a voice from the fog. "Hey, is someone there? I've lost my boots." It was the hiker's voice. Exactly. But it was too loud. It sounded like he was standing right behind my ear, even though the woods were empty. I stood up, my hand on my sidearm. "State your name." "I'm a park ranger." Silence. Then, the sound of something heavy moving through the brush. Not the 4-beat gait of a deer or the heavy trudge of a bear. It was a rhythmic, clicking sound. Snap-click. Snap-click. A figure emerged from the fog 50 yards away. It looked like the hiker. He was wearing the same red flannel shirt. But as he walked toward me, I realized his knees were bending the wrong way. With every step, his legs would snap backward, the bone audibly cracking, then resetting. He wasn't walking, he was being piloted. "Stop right there!" I yelled. The figure stopped. Its head tilted at a 90-degree angle, resting on its shoulder. The face was a perfect replica of the missing man, but the eyes were static. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They were like glass marbles set into a mask of wax. "I've lost my boots," it repeated. This time, the voice didn't come from its mouth. The sound came from the creature's chest. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. I've never felt a primal fear like that, the feeling of being hunted by something that was mocking my own species. I could hear it behind me. It was gaining. It wasn't clicking anymore, it was galloping. It let out a sound that I still hear in my nightmares, a high-pitched, mechanical screech that sounded like a saw cutting through bone. I dove into a narrow rock crevice, a space too small for a man. I turned off my light and pressed my face into the dirt, trying not to breathe. The clicking stopped right outside the crevice. I could see its feet. They weren't feet. The skin of the hiker's legs ended at the ankles, and protruding from them were long, obsidian black needles. It was using the hiker's skin like a costume, but its real body was something spindly, sharp, and alien to this earth. It began to mimic me. It started to breathe exactly like I was, heavy, jagged gasps. It was learning my fear. It stayed there for 4 hours. 4 hours of it scratching the rock with its obsidian needles, whispering my name in voices it had gathered, my mother's voice, my captain's voice, even the voice of the dead hiker. "It's okay, Ranger. We're just rearranging the symmetry." When the sun finally began to bleed through the canopy, the creature retreated. It didn't like the direct light. I waited another 2 hours before crawling out. I found the hiker's red flannel shirt draped over a branch a mile away. Inside the shirt, there was no body. Just a hollowed-out, translucent shell of skin. The creature didn't want the meat. It wanted the shape. I resigned the next day. I don't go into the woods anymore. Because I know that somewhere in those mountains, there's a thing that looks like me, sounds like me, and is just waiting for the fog to roll in so it can find its next set of clothes. The Pine Barrens, New Jersey, USA. My brother and I were hauling a trailer through the Jersey pines at 2 a.m. The radiator blew, and we were stranded on a fire road that didn't appear on any digital map. The pines are a different world. The trees are stunted, twisted things, and the silence is thick enough to choke on. We saw a light in the distance, a flickering, orange glow. We thought it was a house. We walked toward it, hoping for a phone. What we found was a cluster of shacks made of rusted sheet metal and rotting timber. The smell hit us first. It was the smell of a slaughterhouse mixed with bleach. In the center of the shacks was a large, iron pot boiling over a fire. Around it stood 3 men. They weren't men. Not anymore. They were the result of 200 years of isolation and a genetic line that had gone horribly sour. Their skin was the color of curdled milk, and their bodies were covered in thick, weeping sores. The tallest one turned to us. His jaw was displaced, hanging to the left, and his eyes were milky with cataracts. He held a rusted meat cleaver that had been sharpened so many times it was just a sliver of steel. He didn't speak. He made a clicking sound with his tongue, and the other 2 began to circle us. They moved with a low, predatory crouch, their fingers, long and tipped with yellowed, cracked nails, scraping against the dry pine needles. "We're just looking for a phone," my brother said, his voice cracking. The tall one pointed to the boiling pot. Floating in the water was a human hand. A fresh one, lunged. My brother was faster, but the small one, a twitching, hairless thing, leaped from a roof and tackled him. I didn't stay to fight. I know how that sounds, but you didn't see their eyes. There was no soul in them, only a deep, ancient hunger. I ran into the brush, the thorns tearing at my face. I found a processing shed. Inside, the walls were lined with hooks. But they weren't for deer. They were for us. There were dozens of IDs pinned to a board, hikers, truckers, families. These mutants weren't just eating, they were collecting parts to fix their own failing bodies. I saw a man tied to a chair, his eyes wide with shock, his legs already harvested. I found a gallon of gasoline in the shed. I didn't think. I doused the shed and the shacks and threw my lighter. The screams that came from those shacks weren't human. They were high-pitched, warbling shrieks of a species that had long since departed from the human family tree. I found my brother 3 miles away, hiding in a drainage pipe. He'd escaped, but he's not the same. He won't eat meat. He won't go near a fire. And sometimes, at night, He clicks his tongue against the roof of his mouth, just like the men with the displaced jaw. They're still out there. The pines are huge, and the fire didn't take them all. They're just waiting for the next radiator to blow. Ben Macdui, Cairngorms, Scotland. In the Scottish Highlands, there is a phenomenon called the Grey Men. Climbers speak of an overwhelming sense of dread that hits you at the summit of Ben Macdui. They call it the panic. Most people run. Some people jump off the cliffs just to make the feeling stop. I was a solo climber, arrogant and experienced. I reached the summit at dusk. The sky was a bruised purple, and the wind was howling through the rocks. I was setting up my bivy sack when the sound started. Crunch. 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 It sounded like footsteps in the gravel. But these footsteps were rhythmic and massive. Each crunch sounded like a boulder being dropped from a great height. Whatever was walking was at least 15 feet tall. I spun around with my headlamp. The beam cut through the mist, but there was nothing there. Just the vast, empty plateau. Yet, the footsteps didn't stop. They were circling me. Crunch. Crunch. Then, the Grey Men effect hit me. It wasn't just fear. It was a physical weight on my chest. My heart began to misfire, skipping beats. I felt an intense, irrational urge to throw myself off the ledge. A voice in the back of my head, not a ghost voice, but my own voice, was telling me that the air was poison, that the ground was falling, that I had to die to be safe. I saw a shadow. It wasn't cast on the ground. It was standing in the mist. A humanoid shape, towering and gray, with arms that reached down past its knees. It didn't have a face. It was just a density in the air, a pocket of absolute cold. The entity reached out. It didn't touch me, but the air around me began to vibrate at a frequency that made my teeth ache. My vision blurred. I saw the mountain start to dissolve into a gray void. "You don't belong here," a sound vibrated through my skull. It wasn't words. It was a frequency of pure rejection. I bolted. I left my gear, thousands of dollars of equipment, and ran down the scree slope. I fell, skinning my palms and knees, but I didn't feel the pain. I only felt the shadow behind me. Every time I looked back, the Grey Man was there, always the same distance away, its massive limbs moving in slow, terrifying strides. It followed me all the way to the tree line. I spent 3 days in a hospital in Aberdeen. The doctor said I had mountain sickness, but they couldn't explain the bruises on my shoulders. They were in the shape of massive, long fingers. I still feel the panic sometimes. When I'm in a high building or a quiet room, I hear that crunch in the gravel. He's still up there, guarding the peak, waiting for the next person to claim his summit.